Good to be with you all this morning. Let us take a time together, be in meditation with one another. I offer some readings as we go into a silent time of meditation together, just to stir our thoughts and our hearts. And I'll offer a couple, so just let them wash over you. Don't let the words hold them too deeply or too tightly. Just let them kind of catch you where they do. From bell hooks, the transformative power of love is the foundation of all meaningful social change. From Gandhi, there are people in the world so hungry that God cannot appear to them except in the form of bread. From L.R. Nost, it's not our job to toughen our children up to face a cruel and heartless world. It's our job to raise children who will make the world a little less cruel and heartless. And from Woody Guthrie, love is the only God I'll ever believe in. The books of the Holy Bible never say but one time just exactly what God is. And in those three little words, it pours out 100 million college educations and says, God is love. And that is the only real definite answer to 10,000 wild questions and queries that I, my own self, tossed at my Bible. I mean to say that is the only really sensible, easy, honest, warm, plain, quick, and clear answer I found. When I was ready to throw so-called fearful, cowardly, thieving, poisoning religion out my back door, it was these three words that made not only religion, but also several other sorts of superstitious fears and hatreds in me meet one very quick death. God is love. God is really love. And let us now be in silence together. And I invite you from the silence to call forth names of people or places or things that are in your heart that you wish to lift up in prayer or meditation or care. Let us call forth those names.
Jane and Molly. Lois, Joe, Mary, our country, Julie, Val, Mary,
all these things and so much more. We offer our love and our dedication to a better world. Shalom, amen. Blessed be. Wake, my dear, be kind to your beating heart. Awake, my dear, be kind to your beating heart. Take it out into the vast field of light and let it breathe. Take it out into the vast field of life and let it breathe. Awake, my dear, be kind to your beating heart. Awake, my dear, be kind to your beating heart. A little over a month ago, there was this conversation on homelessness, and that's some of you, for those of you who don't know me, that's what I do for my work, is I work with homeless services and work with supporting people experiencing extreme poverty, but mostly homelessness. And a little over a month ago, there was a conversation on homelessness that came up on Fox News. And on that news, that channel, they began to talk about people experiencing homelessness who refuse services. And one of the hosts, Lawrence Jones, said, either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide you got to be locked up in jail. Co-host Brian Kilmeade said, or involuntary lethal injection or something. You just kill them. Gratefully, there was enormous uproar about the comment, and Kilmeade eventually apologized, although probably not enough uproar about the comment, because a lot of people I know didn't even know it happened, and such a statement was made. But even though he did apologize, he wasn't fired for suggesting the state-sponsored murder of tens of thousands of mentally ill people. But also, I think telling is no one criticized the other host's comments about the mass incarceration of people without homes. And I start to wonder how is that different from internment camps, just the idea of putting so many people into prison because they refuse a certain thing. We certainly tried that before. Many of us forget that the Holocaust began with the mass experimentation on and euthanizing of people with disabilities. That was among the very first populations that were attacked and focused on and targeted. as part of what became the Holocaust. And the Nazis had a name for people with disabilities. They called them useless eaters. And I imagine looking at a person and describing them as a useless eater, feeling that kind of sentiment and description of a person. I wrote a social media post recently and in response to some concerns related to homelessness in our community. And I said, imagine seeing someone sleeping outside on a bench and hating them rather than feeling grief at their situation. And that's how damaged some of us have actually become. Bloomington, actually, where the city I'm from now, has a local page specifically dedicated to the hatred of homelessness. It's all about that situation. And I'm not going to name the page because honestly, it doesn't deserve your attention. But it actively depicts people without homes in horrible ways, takes photos of people sleeping outside and in compromising positions, and generally blames them for everything they perceive to be wrong. A few weeks ago, over the course of 2 weeks, there were 3 major violent incidents that took place in Bloomington. All of them were directed at people without homes. The first was a group assault where there was a mob that attacked and beat up 3 people, badly injuring one of them where he lost all his front teeth. And the second that night, it was this very same night, there was a murder in Bloomington of a homeless person in a car, got out of his car and shot and killed a person on the side of the road. And then lastly, the third was about a week later, and it was a security guard who beat a homeless man, then lied that that homeless man had attacked him first, and then was caught on the video when there was local video that captured what actually happened and showed that this man just simply took a police baton to this homeless person who he was encountering in a park. And this all just happened just recently. This is just just down the road. It's not far from here. And there's no doubt in my mind that hateful and violent rhetoric leads to violent acts like these. Each year, homeless people are murdered more often in the United States than any other vulnerable classification of people, with one exception. They're murdered more often than people based on their race. They're murdered more often based on their religion, and they're murdered at about the same rate as people who are transgender. And I believe strongly that our culture and our society is struggling with just an enormous crisis of empathy. I think we're going through this period where we are just losing our capacity to feel other people. And I focus on homelessness because it's my area of expertise, but also because I think it's a canary in a coal mine. It's an indicator of other dangerous issues before us are soon to come. But of course, this crisis is present in so many ways in our culture. I think we all see it to some degree or another. We struggle to recognize our shared humanity across lines of race and religion and ethnicity and nationality and gender, sexual orientation, poverty, education, politics. It's even gone so far right now, this kind of attack on empathy, if you will, that we have some leaders, religious and economic and corporate, who've actively been attacking the act of empathy as immoral. They're really saying and labeling that empathy is an immoral act in some instances, at least. There's a book by a woman named Allie Beth Stuckey. The book's called Toxic Empathy. How progressives exploit Christian compassion, which says that empathy becomes toxic when it encourages you to affirm sin. validate lies, or support destructive policies. Of course, all those policies would, fit in to a certain worldview and not open you up to the possibility that your values might be different, or that sin might be, your perception of sin might be wrong. Joe Rigney, a pastor and a professor, he wrote The Sin of Empathy, Compassion and Its Counterfeits. And he did a lot of things, but he described, remember that Episcopal Bishop Marian Buddy's sermon at the inaugural prayer service, where she called on our current president to have mercy on immigrants and LGBTQ plus folks. He described that, and this is a whammy, but he described that as a reminder that feminism is a cancer that enables the politics of empathetic manipulation. That's a common argument, that empathy is a female trait and we are over feminizing our culture. That's a common, as if men don't have empathy built into them also. Elon Musk, we mostly know him, right? He said the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. Problematic, challenging statement. But when it comes down to it, all of this crisis around empathy, our growing inability to use it, and even some people's motivations to attack. When it comes down to it, I think the truth of the matter behind all of this is that we're all, or most of us at least, very scared. I think we're very scared. And the worst part of it is that we're scared of each other. It's perhaps a little trite, so I apologize, but it's worth doing anyway. But the ever-wise Yoda gives us some really powerful words related to this. He helps us understand this, and when he said to the young Anakin Skywalker, who, sorry, spoiler alert, he becomes Darth Vader. Sorry if I spoil it. But he says this, he says, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. And hate leads to suffering. And I appreciate that comment, because I think hate doesn't just lead to our own personal suffering. It leads to the suffering of others. I will say this with some clarity. I believe this fear that I think we are experiencing more and more is not based on reality, but is being intentionally cultivated. I think that fear is being created. And I think it's being created because I think it makes people, it makes some people very wealthy. And I think it gives some dangerous people more power. And I think those motivations are a deep part of this. The fear actually serves them. When crime goes down, but the fear of crime goes up, and we know that statistically that's happening, something is quite wrong. Something is off when those things happen. Chicago and Washington, D.C. and Portland are being painted as some of the most dangerous cities in the United States. Just yesterday, my sister, who lives in Portland with her husband and my niece, went to a local corner and participated in the protests yesterday in their own smaller way. And she said something about, and they're just on this corner and people are, cheering them on. My little niece, as the only monarchs we need are butterflies as a sunlight. And, it's just gentle, sweet thing. And my sister says, here's some posts or whatever, or pictures from the war-torn Portland, because it's just manufactured, the challenges there. And truly, none of those cities, Chicago, Washington, D.C., or Portland, fit in our nation's top 10 in crime, a violent crime, murder. Chicago is enjoying its lowest crime rate in 60 years. And, so you have to ask, why is this so? Who gains by making people fear this way? And we are, of course, aware of the 24-hour news cycle that is driven by ratings. What draws us to watch? What captures our attention? The old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. But also social media, which has been a near ubiquitous part of our lives over the last 15 years, is not, I think it's important to realize that's not, that content is not driven by what is good, but it's driven by what draws our attention and our engagement. Sometimes that's what is good. But if something makes us engage with anger, it gets more views. And again, not because it's good, but because we feel the need to respond. So there's an intentional cultivation of conflict, often with fake reality being presented, that makes us hate each other. That's happening throughout the political spectrums. These things are being put out that make us furious with each other and make us engage with that fury. In many cases, in things that are very isolated or don't exist at all. And these fear and anger, based approaches to engagement make people lots of money. But I also think they make us more fearful and more distrustful, more hateful, and more dangerous. The fear drives out our capacity to open to each other, which is the absolute heart of empathy. How do we understand one another? How do we care for one another? If we are consistently manipulated into being afraid of each other, being closed off from one another, protecting ourselves from one another. I would argue that empathy is perhaps the oldest and most vital moral value that we have. This story I'm about to share with you, it hasn't been verified as factual because there are no primary sources of the question and answer section where these words may have come from, where these words supposedly came from. But it's a story about an anthropologist, Margaret Mead. And in this story, she was asked by a student what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in human culture and human progress. And according to this story, Mead responded with a healed thigh bone. That seeing a healed thigh bone was her first indication of civilization. And typically in the animal kingdom, an injury like that would lead to that animal's death. That kind of injury would be so severe that that animal would not survive. But a healed femur revealed that someone took time to care for that injured person. And that help, that care, was her sense of when civilization began. I think that's such a fascinating interpretation of when civilization began. It's not when we first started using tools or when we first started doing, systemic agriculture or this or that. When we first started showing evidence of intentional care for one another. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he was a minister, a theologian, and a Nazi resistor, and he was killed during the Holocaust. He wrote this: "That is the wonder of all wonders, that God loves the lowly. God is not ashamed of the lowliness of human beings. God marches right in. He chooses people as his instruments and performs his wonders where one would least expect him. God is near to lowliness. He loves the lost, the neglected, the unseemly, the excluded, the weak and broken." Perhaps our greatest moral teaching is in its nature an axiom of empathy. Our oldest, perhaps, and maybe most important moral teaching, the Golden Rule, which is expressed in every culture and spiritual tradition. In Buddhism, hurt not others in ways that you would find hurtful. In Confucianism, do not unto others what you would have them do unto you. In Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. In Islam, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother that which he loves for himself. In Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. In Zoroastrianism, that nature alone is good, which refrains from doing unto another whatsoever is not good for itself. In Judaism, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. And in Christianity, do unto others what you would do unto yourself. Or my personal favorite, love your neighbor as yourself. There are, of course, variations and even possible improvements on the Golden Rule, such as treat others as you would want to be treated in the same situation, or the Platinum Rule, which says treat others as they would wish to be treated. These are variants on the Golden Rule, trying to make them better. But the point is, in each of those variants, how do we empathize even better than we actually are? But the core of each one of these phrases is to get ourselves to extend ourselves out, to feel into the other, to take their perspective into account, to see them as just as real, valuable, and vital as you yourself are. Philosopher Iris Murdoch said, "Love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real." Chew on that one. I love that one. Love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real. Love that. Powerful stuff. So as we move forward in a culture that may be very well going through a crisis of empathy, it becomes challenging to us to how do we help change that culture in some ways for the better. There's this concept that's often applied to organizational change, and the core of the concept is this: is that anxiety is attractive, but so is calmness and clarity and connection. And you can experience, we all can be an experience where we're experiencing that fear, that anxiety going through, and we can eat it, we can take it into, we can make that anxiety our own. Or we can choose to stand in a place of calm, clear, compassion, and hold that and be that place where the anxiety stops and the fear stops growing. I find strength in doing that by focusing on the wisdom keepers, by focusing on the people who have come before that have shown us their extraordinary capacity for good. We know these folks, there's so many in history. the great teachers of many of our world's religious traditions started in this place and offer us extraordinary wisdom. There are also some for us that are alive or have been alive in our lifetimes that we can use to inspire us. One of my favorites is Mr. Rogers. Keeps me going all the time. I think about him and the way that he's inspired so much. But here are some words from folks that have offered that wisdom and have been with us for many of our lifetimes. There's Dalai Lama. He said, compassion is the radicalism of our time. Compassion is the radicalism of our time. Imagine living with that each and every day. The radicalism of our time is holding forth this compassion. Aldous Huxley, which gives us some words that I think are just amazing. He says it's a bit embarrassing to have been concerned with the human problem all one's life and find at the end that one has no more to offer by way of advice than try to be a little kinder. And then there's our very own Hoosier, Kurt Vonnegut, who offers us these beautiful words. He says, be soft. Do not let the world make you hard. Do not let pain make you hate. Do not let the bitterness steal your sweetness. Take pride that even though the rest of the world may disagree, you still believe it to be a beautiful place. Let us carry forward, let us carry the wisdom keepers with us. Let us hold their words, let us hold their lives. They are inspirations for lives that we can offer and live to. May they be our sustenance. Shalom, amen, and blessing.